Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mitchell McConnell. I sincerely apologize to President Trump and 74 million Trump supporters. I cost the Republican Party and the President victory, and I do solemnly swear that the name of Mitchell McConnell will forever be associated with absolute devastating loss within electoral politics. Mitch McConnell out.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to read you something. McConnell warns White House against making stimulus deal as Pelosi and Mnuchin inch closer. GOP leaders suggest Democrats are not negotiating in good faith, and could disrupt Supreme Court nomination. Mitch McConnell, when you look at it, cost President Trump victory. He cost the Republicans victory on the state level. It wasn't just Mitch McConnell. I mean, you could start with Jeff Sessions before him 4 years earlier. You could start with Paul Ryan. They investigated a Republican president, offered no opposition, offered no rebuttal to just tanking the economy, the national economy, especially within Democratic-run states. The highest unemployment rates, 13 of the top 14 highest unemployment rates are Democratic-run states. That's not Trump's fault. But in terms of not even offering a different viewpoint, Rand Paul did, President Trump did, Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney, Ben Sasse, Kinzinger, Cheney, none of them did. So all the Never-Trumpers stood quiet as Trump was investigated. So they're talking about, there are people saying, well, Trump, if he's that great, why did Republicans lose? Because Republicans didn't want to win. They didn't want to do what it takes to win. And I'm not a lifelong Republican. I was actually a lifelong Democrat. Trump was the first Republican I ever voted for. And you see right now, May 1st, 2021 was a negotiated deal to get us out of our longest running conflict. And Biden is going to keep us there longer. Sending Americans in harm's way, keeping them there forever, is the biggest moral dilemma we face as a country. That's what drives me. I wrote against counterinsurgency conflicts on hagoodman.com. You could read my writing there. In The Hill, The Huffington Post, Salon, the Jerusalem Post, the Roanoke Times, but I have articles in the Roanoke Times, the Jerusalem Post, the Huffington Post, and numerous ones in The Hill. I was a contributor to The Hill. And I wrote against sending Americans into the same quagmires that Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld started. So the Lincoln Project, you're talking about the most immoral people. One of the Lincoln Project people went after. He's now writing for a liberal publication, and he's always on MSNBC, but one of them disparaged a Vietnam veteran, Senator Max Cleland, a triple amputee, a hero, for opposing Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld's foreign policy 20 years back. And then these are the same people who call Tulsi Gabbard a Russian operative. So it's like, you see what they do. They don't have a moral compass. But see, that's Mitch McConnell. He sometimes sides with Trump, but he cost President Trump victory. He's the one who, so hit subscribe to this channel, share this segment everywhere. It's Mitch McConnell's fault. When he was negotiating for a stimulus deal before November of last year, that should have told you something. You don't negotiate when people are like, when Democrats are saying $2,000, which they didn't give, but they're the ones who advocated gleefully science to end the economy as we know it. And there was no pushback, no rebuttal. Apparently, Republicans have no experts, and they have no consensus of experts anywhere. There are never any people with knowledge that side with Republicans. Isn't that interesting? It's always, no studies back any Republican claim. Obviously, I'm being facetious. Obviously, the Republican Party just stands, and stands silent. They're completely inept, and they allow pretty much one party rule when it comes to a whole bunch of things. President Trump was president, but he had to contend with Republicans. But what are you doing negotiating down? McConnell should have said, you know what, how about $3,000 per person? You would have won do you think people in the past year really care about fiscal conservative, like being fiscally conservative? You didn't offer a rebuttal. When Trump tried to open up the economy, McConnell stood silent. Mitt Romney, Ben Sasse, all the Never-Trumpers, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, they stood silent. They don't like Trump's personality, but they vote alongside Trump around 90%, so at least about 80 to 90% of the time. I think Mitt Romney voted alongside Trump 75% of the time. There's a tracker like, how often people vote with Trump. It's on 538 in the age of Trump. Then they created this dumb term called Trumpism, which has nothing to do with why 74 million Americans voted for Trump. Nothing. People voted for Trump because he wanted to remove Americans from never-ending counterinsurgency fiascos created by the Bush administration. People voted for Trump because they wanted tax cuts. People voted for Trump because they wanted a record low. They received record low unemployment. Don't blame Trump for the unemployment mess. The highest unemployment rates are in Democratic-run states. Fact, go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The lowest unemployment rates are in Republican, red states. That's not that. The economic situation in our country today rests squarely on the shoulders of Democrats. They're the ones who were blindsided. They're the ones who didn't take it seriously in the beginning, and they actually were they were just focused on impeaching Trump. Because you have to understand, foreign policy to Democrats is Facebook ads. Foreign policy has been relegated to Facebook ads and Twitter bots and election interference. And they have to be propped up by every talk show host, all of Hollywood, all of Twitter, every social media algorithm, almost every single political publication out there, aside from a couple, maybe 4 or 5 conservative publications, and even those publications don't always, the National Review doesn't always defend President Trump. Half the time, maybe it does. Half the time, it doesn't. And grudgingly, you'll have Fox News turn on Trump here and there. And still, you had 74 million Americans. Imagine if every aspect of society wasn't geared towards spreading Democratic Party talking points. Imagine if this was, 2000 or 2004, or even 2008, 2012. Media wasn't always an extension of the Democratic Party. You have every single publication, New York Times, Washington Post, Vanity Fair, Esquire, Daily Beast, BuzzFeed, Time Magazine, The New Yorker, The Atlantic, Mother Jones, The Nation. I mean, I just named 11 or 12 publications, right? Then all the major, everybody from the Los Angeles Times to every major newspaper. They're all saying the same thing. Trump bad, Trump Russia, Trump Zelensky. He pressured, even though President Zelensky stated he didn't pressure him. And now they're going after Trump, and I did a segment. I've done numerous segments on this, and nobody really seems to understand how important it is. I say, look, it's been 3 weeks, over 3 weeks. It's been 20, I'll do a segment every day. Tomorrow will be 24 days. They got it on the 25th. They got Trump's taxes on the 25th. They found nothing. They found nothing from Trump's taxes. What, they had spent 3 weeks and they didn't look at the returns? They obsessed over them for 4 years. They have all his records now. They still haven't found anything. It's been 4 years. It's been 3 weeks and they've obsessed over it for 4 years. So, you could start with Mitch McConnell trying to reduce stimulus checks. Do you think maybe that had an impact? And you talk about, everything Trump did was not backed by the Republican Party. So why would the Republican Party let's put it this way. He was not defended by Republicans. So why should Republicans blame one person? They should have simply circled the wagons to say, you think that Hillary Clinton was like, a fan favorite within the Democratic Party? They knew that, many of them knew it was a train wreck, but they still circled the wagons and they wouldn't let anyone say anything disparaging. The public relations spin, but the loyalty and allegiance within the Democratic Party, if one person deviates, Tulsi Gabbard has enough courage. And look what they said. They disparaged her. They engaged in slander. They said that she was a Russian operative without baseless claims, without any evidence. Of course, Twitter didn't go to bat, and the algorithms didn't say, disputed claim, or this is a baseless claim, or this is, fact check. Where were the fact-checking organizations? It's a racket. It's a public relations racket that Republicans are a part of, and then they say, oh gosh, we lost. Well, it's your fault. Plus, conservative principles don't really matter at all when you have allowed Democrats to tank the entire economy and turn cities into like Mad Max and Waterworld and like dystopian societies. Everything's closed because science, and yet you had the worst outcomes. Why is that? The top 4 highest per capita rates are in Democratic-run states. They had the most draconian and heavy-handed responses. So how? Look at the aggregate numbers. The aggregate numbers don't lie. But again, they won't look at the aggregate numbers. They'll point to a study. They'll point to experts. They'll point to a consensus. They'll point to fear-mongering, and yet they preside over the worst outcomes. And they condemn and judge. When Herman Cain lost his life, when Republicans lose, and God bless the family of Herman Cain, when he lost his life, Democrats and the most despicable, wonderful, morally superior liberals and the most disgusting and nefarious and gleeful, they were gleefully engaging in the most despicable behavior. Oh yeah, he didn't listen. Ooh, he didn't listen to us. Well, people listened to you. Andrew Cuomo sent infected people into elderly care facilities. The whole point of locking down economies was to prevent elderly people, save grandma. Well, it was Andrew Cuomo and Wolf and Phil Murphy and two other Democratic governors who forced infected people into elderly care facilities and facilities for disabled Americans. These people are they are the most vulnerable when it came to the crisis. So Mitch McConnell is really at fault for this because and Kevin McCarthy too, you have this Kevin McCarthy the other day tried to distance himself from his support of President Trump the past 4 or 5 months pertaining to a certain subject. And it's like, wait a second, why don't you just have the courage to say, look, this is why. Don't try to, and that, Democrats try to link, oh, well, if you say this one thing, all the nutty people will engage in horrendous behavior. It's like, well, you ignored 5 to 6 months of $1 to $2 billion in property damage. Of course, Republicans don't bring that up. 19 lives lost, according to Wikipedia. Republicans don't provide an opposing viewpoint. It was literally just Trump and maybe Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, Ron DeSantis, who did a fantastic job in New York compared to Democratic governors who became America's governors until they weren't. Until people actually looked at the numbers and said, oh, okay, there's no reason for them to be America's governors. They presided over the worst outcomes. But again, you have media shaping the narrative. And President Trump didn't do himself any favors by being on Twitter. Twitter was a trap. It provided momentum. I could see the momentum turning in terms of political momentum because every time he tweeted something, it just gave them steam, electricity, energy, enthusiasm, passion that they wouldn't get. Democrats aren't passionate voters. They feel they're morally superior and they'll just vote for incremental change. Progressives, yeah, the people on the far left, yeah, they're really passionate, but they'll almost always vote Democrat. Or they'll be funneled back into the Democratic Party by AOC and Bernie Sanders, who exists just to funnel votes back into the Democratic Party. See, when I voted for Trump, I got a lot. Allocated more funding to historically black colleges and universities than any president ever. Signed prison reform legislation. signed an executive order combating anti-Semitism on college campuses. Abraham Accords. As a Jewish American, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, recognized the Golan Heights as Israel's. So, I mean, these are things that you get from President Trump if you're a voter. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now.